and we can go ahead and get started. So Kyle Windjack is a Toronto-based multi-instrumentalist, producer, and educator with over a decade of experience in the Canadian music scene. A Humber College graduate, he studied jazz performance and production under some of the country's top musicians. Known for his versatility on guitar, piano, vocals, trumpet, and drums, Kyle has performed with artists including Christian McBride and Anderson, I don't know how to say his last name.
Anderson Park.
Yes, okay, thanks. His work spans genres both as an in-demand session player and as a songwriter and producer. His original music, rooted in jazz, folk, and soul, is regularly showcased in Toronto, Nashville, and Los Angeles, where he continues to collaborate with a wide range of artists. So, without further ado, Kyle, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everybody. Nice to see you all again. This is a topic that everyone loves, making money. Let's go. So let's kick it off just by, I've got like a whole list here of a bunch of different ways. Many of them, most of them I would say I have firsthand experience with. Some of them I know from other people who do it, how it sort of works a little bit. But there's a million different ways that you can pay your bills, and let's start just by I think if we generally I'm cool with unmuting to ask questions and participate and stuff, but for this one it might just this first question it might get a little too hectic if we do that. So just put it in the chat any ways that you know of that you can make money, and I'll see if you guys have come up with anything that isn't on my list here, and we can talk about that as well. Just curious. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Socials. Yeah, I mean, I have like YouTube, and I've got sponsorships on here. Right? I guess it's related to socials, but there's probably other ways that you can monetize socials as well that I'm not considering. Yeah, so can through publishing and everything. Writing. Arts admin, sure. I didn't have that one. Cool. Looking into cruise lines right now. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the there's different types of gigs that you can get on cruise lines as well. I'm actually doing a 4-day cruise with a headliner band later this or next month. Nice. All right, yeah. I mean that covers a lot of the bases. Most of those I had on my list here. We've got a few that might be a little unexpected. So to start off, we've got live performances, which is obvious, but there are a ton of different types of live performances. So I just want to talk a little bit about the different avenues that you could possibly perform at. Many of you will have done a lot of these, or at least been aware of them. We'll talk about what they pay on average. It can range, but we'll talk about some kind of pros and cons of different live performances. So, where most of us start out is playing in bars, or many people start out with busking as well, I guess, especially if you start young and you're not old enough to play in bars. But we'll start with bars regardless. The pay for bars typically isn't the best. A lot, but there's other reasons besides the pay to do those gigs sometimes, and I'm not talking about the free drinks. It can be good networking mainly, and a lot of people who are playing bar gigs are also doing more lucrative gigs, and you can kind of get in with those networks, so it can be a good starting point. But in terms of pay, you're looking at anywhere from nothing, which you shouldn't do, but there are lots of bar gigs that don't really pay anything. Um, and they go up to, I think probably the most I've ever been paid for like a bar gig is maybe like $400, which would be like that's a busy bar on a weekend. Like you'd need a good spot for that. That'd be like for the Toronto people, that'd be like if you play Drone Taberna on a Saturday night from 10 to midnight and you have a four-piece band, you'll probably make like $400. Um, but the guarantee there is $100. It just depends on how busy it is. So, you know, typically I would say for bar gigs, you like try to get at least $100 guarantee and like a meal and some drinks or whatever. Um, and like if you do a lot of those gigs, it's probably not going to be your sole source of income, but you do 10 of them in a month, or some people do way more than that. Um, Especially in Nashville, which is kind of a different thing, and we could talk about that in a second. But yeah, there are people who might do like 20 bar gigs in a month, and if you're doing that many bar gigs, chances are you have other gigs as well because it's a lot of the same circles of people, which, like I was saying, is a lot of the real value of playing in those bands. But you can make a couple $1,000 a month doing that, so it's not going to be like that'd be pretty busy with bar gigs. It's still not quite enough to pay your bills, but it combined with a few other things, it can go a good chunk of the way. But yeah, like if you're in bands that are doing well at bars, often you'll get wedding gigs out of that and corporate gigs out of that. And depending on the band, sometimes festivals and other types of things as well. So when you're talking about like corporate and wedding work, the like bare minimum is like 250 a person, I would say, and that goes up to like it can go higher um, if you're playing like if you have like notoriety. Like some people will hire a specific band for their wedding and they charge a premium for that. Like I have some friends who, you know, if somebody wants their band for a wedding, they're gonna charge 100 grand between the five of them or whatever. But they're also getting like they could draw 1,500 people out to a festival, so it's a different thing. So if you're not um, if you don't have like a big following as an artist, if you're playing a wedding as like a cover band, you're typically looking at somewhere between $250 and 1,000. 1,000 would be like really good, but I would say on average, it's usually like 400 if it's in town, 600 if it's like if you got to drive a couple hours. Um, that's like just ballpark from my experience what I usually get for gigs like that. Um, Sometimes I'll do them for less, and sometimes we get offered more, and that's great. I think I don't think I've actually ever had a wedding gig that's paid $1,000. Maybe I have. I know like lots of people who have, but I think the highest paying wedding gig that I can recall doing in the last little while is like 850. But yeah, somewhere in that range. And then yeah, we've also got busking on this list, which again, you can really get a lot of wedding gigs from busking. And that can be, it's kind of like if you go out there with a band, especially, and you're like making a spectacle, a lot of brass bands will go out busking, and that tends to work really well. I know people who are successful with it, doing like the solo busking thing as well. I've never really done that, but with bands, I've we kind of treat it as like paid rehearsal when we were doing that back in the day. And, we would go out and we would try new repertoire and kind of just get things sounding tight. And it's a pretty low pressure environment. And, maybe you go out for 3, 4 hours, you make 100, $200 a person. So it's decent. And then you might also get a wedding gig that pays 500 or 600 bucks because people will come by and they'll take one of your business cards or they'll leave a business card for you to contact them. So yeah, busking can be it can be good for that, and it's also just like you can kind of do it whenever within reason. Like you need to go to a spot that makes sense and is busy, and not every spot is going to be good every day. But when I was in my early 20s, I would busk with like 3 different bands were doing it. They were all brass bands. And all of those bands were working in bars and clubs and doing some weddings and stuff and some corporate events. Which, by the way, the rates for corporate events are essentially the same as weddings. And that might be like, office parties, conferences, that kind of thing. But yeah, I was out there busking like 5 days a week, make on average like $100 a day doing that, and then we would do our other gigs and stuff in the evening. And at that time my expenses were really low. It was, I could pay 50% of my bills just busking, and then we we would get a good amount of work, especially in the summer, from the contacts that we would meet, just people hearing us on the street. So it's it can be good. I think it's not something that you want to lean on forever, but especially if you're starting out, um, yeah, it's a good learning experience. You get repertoire together, you get used to playing a lot. Yeah, like I wouldn't want to go back to it, to be honest, at this point, but I'm glad that I did it pretty heavily for several years. There's probably like 4 summers where I was busking like a ton, and yeah, you know, good times, good memories. So next on the list, we've got festivals. So I've actually got a little festival directory here. I'm gonna drop it in the chat. It's just a spreadsheet of. I don't think it's comprehensive. I'm sure there's a lot of festivals in Canada that aren't on the spreadsheet, but there's a ton here. There's like a few hundred, I think. Let's see, like 143. So the uh, the dates might be not entirely accurate. Um, oh, these are also only the West Coast ones. So I have one across all of Canada that's more than this. I sent you guys the wrong link. So I will find the correct link that I made more recently and send it that. These are still all legit, but they're all on the West Coast. So I'll send another one with stuff in Ontario and other provinces as well. So let's see. Yeah, in terms of festivals, you know you can get certain types of festival gigs through the bar scene and through word of mouth and through just applying with links. You don't necessarily need a following. But that's a different type of festival gig than, like an artist festival gig where you're there to like draw people out. So what I mean by that is there are certain festivals like food festivals are a good example. Uh, some of like the smaller jazz festivals, um, or even the TD jazz festivals, to be honest. Um, any sort of like BIA event, which is the Business something Alliance. Um, but basically, every like neighborhood in a major city will have a BIA chapter, and they have a certain amount of funding to put towards like community events, like little street festivals and stuff. Um, so what I'm getting at is these types of festivals will hire a band just because they're good and fun, and it doesn't matter if anybody has ever heard of them or not. So they can be like a good foot in the door. And for that sort of thing, you're looking at anywhere from like 150 to $500 a person, depending on the budget. Usually, I would say on average around 300. So yeah, hopefully that spreadsheet's useful to some of you if you want to apply to play some festivals. If you get into a festival that's a fair bit of travel, you can also apply for a travel grant. And grants in general are another way to supplement your income. But if you book like a reputable festival and you have like a confirmation letter and preferably a contract, the chances of getting a travel grant are very, very high if you apply for it. Um, so you can't necessarily count on it 100%. It kind of has to make sense even without the grant. But um, if you book something, just keep that in mind that it's worth applying, and you more than likely will get some additional funding to cover your expenses. All right. Okay, so now we're on to cruise ships, which somebody was saying that they're interested in that before. So hopefully this will be helpful for you. So on the ships, there's kind of a, I don't want to say a hierarchy, but it does sort of feel that way because there's like different kind of pay grades slightly, or sometimes drastically, and different like perks and levels of privilege and stuff. And a lot of people will start with longer contracts doing um, like the show band or the orchestra on a ship. And if you apply to an agency and you've never done a ship before, that's probably what they're going to want you to do. Um, and it can be a good gig. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that gig, but we'll just kind of break down the different options, and some of them are more difficult to get than others. But yeah, for like a show band contract, some things that you can expect are your pay is going to be somewhere between like 2,400 a month USD. So that's like $3,000, which doesn't sound like a lot. And I mean, it's kind of not, but you also get all your food and your accommodations covered. So if you're able to like not pay rent elsewhere, these contracts are also typically pretty long, like 6 to sometimes 8 months. So it's a long time to be gone. But you can like, even if you're only making like 24 to like 3,000, which would be maybe 4,000 Canadian. So yeah, like 3 to 4,000 Canadian a month. But if you don't really have any expenses and you do that for 6 months, or 8 months or whatever it is, you can rack up a good amount of savings. And then if you're smart about, I would just say if you're going to do something like that, to have a plan of like how you're going to get out of that cycle, because it can become a cycle where It's like, if you're trying to establish yourself on a scene and you're doing all these gigs and you're working, if you go on a ship, you're gonna lose all those gigs, and some of them you might get back when you come back. Other ones you might not. So what happens with some people is they'll take a cruise ship gig and they'll go and they'll stack up some savings, and then they'll just come back and kind of like spend it all and get a little bit too comfortable, but then they haven't been like hitting the scene hard enough to get their gigs back, and they're kind of just like, oh shit, I'm out of savings now. I guess I should do another contract, and then that cycle just repeats. Um, so it can be a really, really great thing to do because you're going to get your chops up. Depending on the position, you might be reading a lot of music. If you're not a strong reader, there still are positions that you can do. We'll get into that later if you guys are interested. But yeah, it's you might meet some good musicians. Typically, you're probably not going to meet the types of connections that will help you long term in your career, but you never know. Um, so you're sacrificing a lot of potential networking opportunities on land and the ability to like get some momentum going. But the upside is, say you're trying to either relocate to a new city or like just get established in the first place. Like if you're not already working a lot as a musician and you want to be, and you don't want to have a day job and you just want the funds to be able to like commit fully for like, a year or 6 months or whatever it is to like be able to get that momentum. To me, that's like a really, really good reason to do something like that. Or if you have um, like debt or something that you need to pay off, then like it's an even better reason. I mean, student loans are kind of a different ballgame because most of them, the interest is so low on them that it doesn't make sense to pay it all off as fast as you can. Like usually for student loans, at least in Canada, you should just make the minimum payment um, because most of it's interest free. So if you have extra money, you're better off just investing it somewhere safe and then paying the minimum. Um, Anyways, maybe I'm on a bit of a tangent here, but that I would say is kind of it's still a good gig, but it's maybe in my opinion, the least desirable out of all the cruise ship gigs because you have to share a cabin with somebody else, which for some people they might not mind. Other people that might be a deal breaker, and the pay is like slightly lower than some of the other positions. Um, the next sort of tier up from that would be like the party band. Similar pay, um, but if you can do it with a band that is solid, then at least like who you're going to be working with. So just for that reason alone, I think um, it can be good because if you're doing the same gig every or 6 days a week for like months and months on end, um, I don't know. For me, I would want to know that the band that I'm playing with is going to be fun musically, which you know on the ships like it can really vary. Like the bands are almost always decent, uh, and sometimes they're really really good. Like I've heard some crazy good bands on ships. So it's like if you're with a band like that and you get a contract, you know that it's going to be fun musically. And then uh, another position on cruise ships is the piano bar or the pub guitarist. So like a singing guitarist or a singing pianist, and that gig um, is definitely better in my opinion because you get a single cabin and the pay is kind of the same, but you're also making tips. So you might be making like, let's say, 4 grand Canadian a month from your salary, but then you could also be making that much um, in tips. So that's like all of a sudden like really good money considering that you don't have any bills to pay. You're just like stacking 8 grand a month. Um, Mind you, that would be um, like that would be somebody who's really good at working the crowd and getting tips and is also on a like bigger, busier ship, which you might not get right away. They're gonna typically give that to more experienced people who they know like have good ratings and stuff. Um, but even if you're making an extra $1,000 a month in tips, like that's pretty solid. So that's I guess the next sort of tier up, and then all of those gigs you can get through agencies like ProShip. There's Lime. There's Windish or Windish Entertainment. There's Studio 16. Um, there's a bunch of them. I would say like ProShip and Lime, from what I understand, are two of the more reputable ones. I have a friend who's an agent at ProShip, and he like told me to send in some stuff to them, and I did, and they ended up offering me some contracts that I just didn't take because they were too long, or I didn't want to share a cabin or whatever, and like I'm like thanks for offering, but I don't think this is for me. And then I ended up getting an offer from not even from an agency, just from the band itself. They were looking for a guitarist for this headliner act, which that's kind of like the best gig that you can get on a ship because the contracts are often really short. Like I said, I'm doing one that's 4 days coming up, and they'll sometimes we'll go out for like a few weeks or whatever. But it's like it's a super kind of cushy version of the gig because um, you get what's called guest status. So as you can go in all the crew areas, you can go to the crew bar, get your cheap beer or whatever, and do laundry and all that. But you can also go in all the guest areas at any time, and you don't have to like wear a name tag. You can eat the nicer food, and you get a guest cabin with like a window or sometimes even a balcony. Um, and you don't have to share. You get like a nice big room. So if like I don't know, for me in when I was in my early 20s, if I got offered one of those ones where like you were just playing every day and you had to share a cabin and the pay was still like not bad but uh not as good. I would have been like hell yeah, that sounds great. So um for a lot of people when they're starting on ships, that's what they do. I kind of never really intended to do ships. Um, but then I just got offered like a really good position. So now I do it with one band. Um, and for headliner stuff, um, as a sideman, you're probably making about like 6,000 a month. Um, if you're like the band leader, I think it depends. Like I've heard of people making up to like 15 grand a month US doing that. So at that point, it's like quite lucrative. Um, I don't make that kind of money because I'm not a band leader. But well, I am a band leader, but just not for headliner acts. Um, so yeah, and comes with all sorts of other perks, and you only do one show a week. So instead of like 4 hours a day, 6 days a week on call, you're 2 hours once a week. So when you think of like that hourly rate, it's kind of insane, but it's also you know you're losing out on even though you're not gone for long periods, you still are subbing out of other gigs, so you took that into effect as well, or into account rather. Um, those gigs, there's a couple agencies that do it. Um, I didn't book it through an agency, so I can't really say. Like I know what the process is like booking, um, like show band or party band and stuff like that. Um, is just done through an audition through ProShip, Lime, whatever else. But with the headliner stuff, it's kind of done through a separate booking system that I don't really have too much insight into, to be honest. Like I'm just hired by the band directly, and the band isn't hired with any agency. But I know that I'm drawing a blank. Blackburn is the sort of the biggest agency that does headliner stuff. So if you wanted to look into something like that, you could. Just know that you will need like a very polished like show rather than like you need an act to apply for something like that. Like think like it should be the quality of something that could be on like a Las Vegas strip residency. Um, and yeah, the show that I do sometimes is really really great. The band leader is phenomenal. He's like a former um, not Broadway but like Las Vegas musical theater guy, and the band is really really tight, really good musicians. So that's fun. Um, does anybody have questions about ships or any other types of gigs? We're gonna cover a bunch of different stuff. I hope I didn't spend too much time on that because maybe not everybody's interested in that lifestyle, but I maybe spent some extra time because I saw the comment earlier that Cameron's looking into cruise lines. No questions? Cool. All right. And yeah, like always, you guys can DM me. Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna put my Instagram in the chat. You can also message me on Slack too, but I'm not on there every day. Instagram, I will see it. Yeah, so where are we in the list? Okay, so touring. Touring, I mean, I've never done a profitable tour with like my own music, so I can't really speak with any authority on how to do that. I've done like I've toured as a sideman where I'm just getting paid like a per diem, like a day rate. Um, there are I know in like the Nashville scene in particular, their bar scene is a little bit different, especially on Broadway. So I don't know how many of you have been there. I think I asked in another workshop, and most people haven't. But there's a street called Broadway where there's I don't know maybe 50 or 60 bars, and it's just like this small little strip, and it's basically all bars. And each bar has like anywhere from 1 to 4 bands because some of the bars will be like multiple levels, and each level will have a band on it. So there's like maybe 150 bands in each of these bars, and they do it in shifts. So they do uh, every day, 365 days a year. They'll have bands from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., from 2 to 6, from 6 to 10, and from 10 to 2 a.m. And you know, it's kind of funny. Like if you're walking down that street, there'll be like 50 bands playing, and it's not like it's a little chaotic, but like it's not like you're hearing all the bands from the street, but you can like kind of see them through there's like, oh yeah, there's bands everywhere. Some of them you can hear from the street, and then all of a sudden there's no bands playing, and you're going into all these bars, and you're like, why is nobody playing on this entire street right now? And then you realize, oh, they do it on shifts so that um, a lot of these musicians will just like swap places, and they'll go and play with a different band for the next shift. So they all do their changeover at the same time. So there'll be like 15 minutes where everybody's switching in between shifts, and everybody's like walking down the street with their gig bags, going to a different bar or going to their car to get across town. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like there are some people who will do like 2 or 3 shifts a day, which is crazy because you're playing for like 12 hours straight and there's no breaks, uh, other than the changeover for 15 minutes. Um, but for the people doing that, they're making anywhere from like $100 to like $500. It depends on like, if you're getting like the later slots on a weekend, of course you're going to make more because it's mostly tips, but that street is always just flooded with tourists, especially in the summer. So you make really good tips. Um, so anyways, like there are people doing that full time, making 150K. You're playing the same 400 pop country covers. So, you might not want to do that. That might not be what um, what you're getting into the industry for. I know for me it's not, but if I do move down there, which I'm considering, I'll probably do those gigs and treat it as like a day job kind of thing. And I've personally wouldn't want to be doing it like 60 hours a week like some people do, but if you do it 20 hours a week or something while you're working up other connections, then it can be good. And the other thing about that is a lot of people are doing it that way, especially if they're like trying to be session players doing like bus gigs and artist gigs and studio gigs. They'll go down there and they'll start playing on Broadway. It's good for your chops, it's good for meeting people, and for paying your bills while you build yourself up. And then um, oh no, uh, I'm just reading Cameron's comment because I specifically talked about cruise ships for like a while because I saw your comment and you
Oh
were
my
not.
gosh, sorry.
That's okay. I mean, like I
That's
think there were lots of other people who wanted to hear about that as well, but I just feel bad that you didn't get to hear it. We can like book a call and talk about it if you want, because I know
okay. Sorry about
quite a
that.
bit
Thank you.
about it. It's okay. Um, yeah, yeah. Just here. I already put my Instagram in the chat earlier, but you must have been gone then. So I'll do that. Send me a DM and we can set up a time to pop on Zoom. Um, anyways, now we're talking about the bar scene in Nashville, how the Broadway scene works there, and it's similar to bar gigs in anywhere else really, except there's just like a ton of them, and they're all on the same street. It's kind of weird. So yeah, I mean that could be a really cool way to do things, and then similarly to how I was talking about like bar gigs, in Canada can lead to like getting in with wedding bands and with corporate events bands and um, some types of festivals and stuff like that. Um, in a scene like that, where there's a ton of recording artists, a lot of those people will end up doing bus gigs. So that's basically when you're like living on a tour bus with like a major artist. And yeah, you just kind of sleep in the bus while you're driving to the next city, and then you wake up in a different place and you play the show and you do it again. And then you would get like a per diem for your travel and then your show rate as well. Which, from what I've heard, I've never done one of these gigs. I know people who do them, but I personally haven't. I've done some like, um, you know, shorter, less legit tours that still pay, but you're not like living in a huge tour bus that costs $250,000. But from what I've heard, those gigs can range anywhere from like pretty bad pay, like just like $150 a day, which I guess I mean, that's kind of like worse than a cruise ship gig in terms of pay because it's like, yeah, your expenses are kind of covered, but like you still have to buy food and stuff. Um, and you're, you might be out on like a month-long run, which like maybe you could sublet your room, but it's like, at least with a cruise gig, it's like, yeah, the pay is similar at the lowest level, but um, if you're gone for 6 months, you can rent out that room and then you're not paying rent. Where if you're gone for 2 to 6 weeks, it's like maybe you still can. But anyways, but those gigs can um, go up to a lot of money. Like I've heard of, especially, this is all secondhand what I've heard from other musicians, but apparently like if you're with a legacy act, like somebody that became very famous in the 90s or before, um, essentially there was just like way more money to go around back then because they were coming up while CD sales were still huge. And so those artists just like have a ton of money and will pay better. So for those people, like I've heard of up to like a couple $1,000s a day. So, you go out on tour for a month, you make 60 grand. Great. Um, but so that's like kind of the scope of bus gigs, anywhere from $3,000 a month to 60,000 as a sideman, or side person, I should say. But yeah, I think probably on average an entry level thing would be like maybe 5 would be my guess. It's probably like near the lower end, but I don't know. If somebody offered me a bus gig for $3,000 a month, no, sorry, not happening. 6 maybe. So yeah, I don't know. And these are, by the way, like some of these artists that are paying like pretty low wages, they're playing stadiums, and it's like it's kind of crazy. Like there's something going on um, with, maybe they signed a bad deal or something, but the math doesn't really make sense. It looks cool on Instagram, but you're not really uh, getting paid properly at that point, unfortunately. And a lot of times you could try something like that to get your foot in the door and it would be a good experience. Gigs like that will often have a high turnover rate too, because people will do it once just to like have done it and then they want to move on to something better. So, that might be how you start out if you're trying to get into that world, just because that's where the openings are going to be. The guy who's getting paid 10 grand a month to be on the road is much less likely to give up that gig, and so there's less likely to be an opening. But anyways, that's touring. Okay, so this next one is actually, it's one that like I feel like most people don't really consider, but it can be like reasonably lucrative. You probably could make a living at it. That would be pretty intense, but I mean, for me, like I've made 20-30 grand in a year doing retirement homes. So the way I've got like a whole system of like how I book them, and yeah, like I use like a CRM and everything. You don't necessarily have to get that intense with it, but for me, it helps me keep it organized. So if anybody's interested in seeing how a CRM works, I can show you guys after we take a break. But for most people, just like using a spreadsheet and like calling and emailing these places is good enough. But yeah, when I book them, I try to get at least $200 for an hour, sometimes up to $350. A lot of the places will only have a budget for $100 an hour, but sometimes you can book a couple of them in the same area in the same day, and maybe one of them pays $100, but the other one pays $250, and then it's worth it. Like with driving and setup, that's like 4 or 5 hours. It's pretty good. And yeah, so if I'm like touring with my own music, I will often book retirement home gigs just to cover my travel expenses. So if I'm when I drove from here to LA, I played like maybe like 30 of them on the way down. And I took my time and I explored different places across the country and stuff. And I was playing other gigs as well. But to be honest, like for that commute across the country until I actually got to LA and I had other stuff lined up there, yeah, it was basically like retirement homes were paying for all of my gas and costs and what have you. So, yeah, and that's a good point too. They're really rewarding gigs because like you're making these people's day. You do have to play like stuff that they're gonna like. So I mean, and I happen to like that stuff too, so I don't mind playing like Elvis and Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson. Like I love that stuff. But if you're gonna do it, just bring the proper repertoire that's gonna kind of resonate with that demographic, right? Early childhood music education is one that I have never considered, but that's a good point as well. So yeah, it's kind of a win-win. You can make decent money doing it, and it's the people appreciate it. Sometimes you'll get heckled because like some old people just don't have a filter, but I just think that's funny. They just get like old and senile and they'll start like yelling stuff. But for the most part, everybody's very sweet. Yeah. And we're on to live sound, which I have never really done live sound. I've done a couple of gigs, but it's pretty similar in terms of rates to like being a session player or like a live side person. There are different types of sound gigs. Like the bar gigs are going to be pretty comparable. The touring rates are going to be pretty comparable. Festivals, weddings, those rates seem to be like pretty similar, whether you're doing sound or you're playing in the band. If you're the main artist in the band and you have a good draw, that's a different thing. We can talk about that in a little bit, but another good way to supplement kind of DIY tours, if you're trying to just like string something scrappy together, is to do house concerts, which can be surprisingly lucrative, especially if most of them are like pay what you can, but usually like you can work out a deal where a lot of people are happy to host them just because it's fun and cool, and they don't want to cut like a bar might. Sometimes you could even sell, if not drinks, definitely merch, which is another topic in general. But I found this link earlier today when I was kind of brainstorming things. It's now, full disclosure, I have not used this service or even really looked into it extensively. I had a peek at their website for maybe 5 minutes, and it looks like it could potentially be a cool way to find people to host a house concert for you if you're looking for that. So check it out, but I can't personally vouch for it. It was on a website of type his name in here. It was on Ari Herstand's website. He was recommending it, and I generally like Ari and what he has to say about the music business. He's very knowledgeable. I know him personally, not well, but we've hung out a few times in LA. I've gone to see him do some of his podcasts, and he's at like every indie show there. It's kind of crazy. Like if you go to LA for a month and you go out a lot, you will run into Ari. It's pretty cool. He's like, he's got a book called How to Make It in the New Music Business, and and it seems like he's made a lot of money off that. So maybe I should publish a book to this list. But he's a cool songwriter too, and he goes out to support a lot of like kind of up and coming local acts, usually with a bit of buzz. But he's always out and about. So he seems to vouch for this service. I personally can't, but I thought I would share it, and you can check it out yourself. Then the next one is merch, which if you're doing the artist thing, then you should definitely have merch at a certain point, probably sooner rather than later, because people want to support things that they like, and if you have an extra option for that, then it's just a good extra revenue source. There are probably grants that will fund merch productions. I don't know which ones specifically, but if the startup cost is too much for you right now to do it on your own, that might be something to look into, is getting a grant for that. And then we've got sponsorships. Typically, a sponsor is gonna want you to be playing some pretty high profile stuff, like either touring with a major artist or at like minimum 10,000 followers on Instagram is probably when you might get some sponsors interested in what you're doing. I mean, some of them might for less, but to me that seems a little bit sketchy. Like the deal's probably going to be sketchy if they're interested in a sponsorship at any level less than that. I personally don't have any social media following really. of note. So it's not something that I've looked into. But I know some people who are sponsored mostly just for like they get either free or cheap gear. So they'll be like a D'Addario artist and they put it in their bio and they get all their strings for free or whatever. Right? But you know, the more attention you have on you, the more leverage you have, of course. So I won't continue on that because it's not something that I have personal experience with, really. And then grants is the next on the list, which we've already talked about grants a lot, and we could talk about it a lot more, but yeah, we did a whole session on it last time, so I'm not going to get into the weeds there unless there's specific questions about it. Yeah, and then we've got YouTube and streaming, which the deal on streaming, like everybody knows, is notoriously pretty bad. But like if you happen to get on some good playlists and you're getting like millions of monthly listeners and you are independent, like there's not a label that is taking a cut of what you're doing, then you can make some decent money off of streaming, at least enough to fund more albums and to do promo and kind of hopefully feed that cycle. Yeah, I don't know anybody who's like their primary income is streaming, but I know people who are able to rack up $50,000 over time and put that into a new album and the release strategy for that, and then that will fund the next one. So it's it can be done. And then we've got record deals. So I think you guys have already had people talk about like the different kinds of deals and stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there are pros and cons. One of the cool things about social media and the way that the things are going right now with because you can do everything yourself, you kind of have to now up until a certain point when you've proved that you can do it and that there's a demand for what you're creating, and then people will be willing to kind of like they want to jump on a moving train, or like if you already have the fire going, then yeah, there are these record companies that will be willing to pour some gasoline on that fire in exchange for 40% or whatever it is, but one of the good things about the whole DIY thing, like there's not really development deals anymore. Like you can't really just get signed on potential, at least not purely potential. There has to be statistics backing it in terms of social media and streams, etc., ticket sales. But the good thing about that is if you can get your career to the point where you don't need a record label, well then when everybody wants to sign you, now you have leverage because they want you to sign and you're doing fine without them. You don't really need them. So that's incentive for them to offer a better deal, or at least they might not like offer it just straight out of the gate, but it gives you more negotiating power if you're like, oh, I can just walk away from this and I'm doing fine already and I continue to grow it and still own everything. But if you'll sweeten the pot and do A, B, and C, and you think that's going to be worth it, then you can take those meetings and shop it around and see who's interested. And if it doesn't work out, like it's just like a good negotiating position if you're able to be able to walk away. Um, my friend was telling me a kind of a funny story about her first record deal. She's still on her first record deal, but when she signed it, like maybe 18 months ago, at the time she was like really blowing up on TikTok, and she was looking for a producer for her first album. And so we did a couple meetings, and really vibed well. And so she was like considering me as one of the options to do this album. But then she started getting interest from major labels, and of course, I wasn't going to do it for free, and she didn't have a ton of money. Like she just worked like an entry level job. She was like 22 at the time or something, and so she didn't have like the 30 grand or whatever it would be to like pour into to an album. So for her, it made sense. Like she had never released anything, but she was really blowing up on TikTok, and all these labels wanted to sign her, and they were willing to advance her enough money to pay for the album and for her to move to Nashville and just live there and not have to worry within reason about bills for a couple of years. So like, it's easy to say, yeah, like the record labels are taking advantage of artists and like these deals suck, and it's like there are definitely examples of that for sure, but they're bringing a lot to the table as well through their networks and through financial means. Like um, she's like her record sounds amazing, and yeah, so she was telling me about like the whole process of that. So of course I didn't end up doing the album with her because she signed with one of them and did it with them, which I don't blame her for at all. But I guess one of the labels, um, I won't get into specifics here because it might be proprietary information. If I were to disclose it, I don't know if it is, but I'm just not going to. But I can say that one of the labels owned another label, and they had both made her an offer. And the, I guess like the smaller label that the bigger label owned called her manager, and they were like, look, we're not saying that we can offer you more money, but I can tell you that we're legally not allowed to offer you more money while that other offer is still on the table. So basically they were like, we're not telling you that we'll give you a better deal because we're not allowed to tell you that. But if you turn down that other one, might happen, so so then she ended up turning down the other offer, and then they called her back the next day. They're like, okay, here's the real offer. Right? So I don't know what the moral of the story is there. I guess consider your options. But yeah, we're on to publishing deals now. So a publishing deal, for those of you who don't know, actually, why don't we break it up here and have some fun? Does anybody know what a publishing deal is and wants to give a definition? You just unmute if you do. Oh, okay. So I guess this is something. Oh, go ahead.
Aren't you you sign up with a publisher and you write songs for them to give you a salary, and they have you collaborating with other songwriters, and they pitch all that music out to performing artists and syncs or what have you?
Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah, so it's essentially it's like the equivalent of a record deal, but for a songwriter. So if you're writing for pitch, like if you're writing songs that, as Samuel was saying, you want other people to record, and then when they do that, you collect the publishing off of that. you can get, and you can make money that way, by the way, without having a publishing deal as well. And that's often how people will start. There are sort of two paths to getting a publishing deal, which I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, the gist of it is you sign to a publisher, and they will help connect you with other songwriters to write with. They'll like kind of manage your schedule for you, and they'll book co-writing sessions with a bunch of other writers that are either on their roster or with other publishing companies that they collaborate with. And you'll get what's called a draw, which is, it's kind of like a salary, but it's more like an advance, because it's recoupable, which means that let's say, so for a lot of songwriters, they'll be on a publishing deal for a long time before they have anything that makes a lot of money. So let's say your publisher was giving you $4,000 a month, and they had been doing that for 10 months, so you owe them $40,000 essentially when that check comes in from the hit song that you wrote. So let's say like 10 months into it, you write a song that Rihanna cuts, or is Rihanna still releasing music? I don't know. Anyways, but let's say that song makes $1 million, and then just in the publishing side, let's say it makes $1 million, and then you split that between the 3 writers, let's say, or let's say it's 4 writers, just for better math. So then that's $250,000. Well, before you get any of that, so you're depending on the deals. There's what's called a co-pub deal, which is a little bit different, and like it's usually only for like established hit writers. But your first deal will usually look like a 50-50 split after that's recouped. So let's say your share of that $1 million is $250,000. Well, your publishing company is going to take half of that because they helped get it cut. And then they're also going to take the $40,000 that they essentially loaned you to cover your living expenses while you were getting to that point. So you'd make $210,000, which is still great. I mean, that's like a number 1 pop hit. If you're talking a country hit, those numbers might be like half of that. Well, actually, maybe not. Because like for a pop hit, that would actually be a little low. But anyways, I digress. Publishing deal is kind of like a record deal, but for a songwriter. The way to get publishing deals, I don't have one. I'm meeting with some publishers. I'm kind of getting on their radar, which is how most writers get signed. So most writers will get signed by writing songs with other songwriters who have publishing deals. And then once you do that, so every time, if you have a publishing deal, you have to, like every time you do a session, you submit that song to your publisher and they listen to it, right? So your publisher will set up a lot of co-writes for you, but a lot of songwriters will also just like set up stuff with people that they meet, that they like, that they want to write with. So if you can meet some of those people and write with them, then they're submitting those songs to their publisher with your name on it as a co-writer. And if those songs are good, then that publisher is probably going to want to meet you. And then maybe they'll set you up with some of their other writers and kind of, they'll ask them, well, how was it to write with this person, and they'll listen to the quality of songs that are coming back, and they'll kind of just keep you on their radar and like start kind of setting you up with more people to write with. And at that point, you're not signed; you're just kind of like in their ecosystem, and then eventually, you might do a meeting, and then you do some more writes, and then if that's going well, they'll meet with you a few times, and there's sort of like a courting process like that. So I'm in like the early stages of that with at least one publisher. From what I understand from the other people that I've talked to who are signed, usually it'll happen that way several times and not work out before one does. Yeah, so it's like it can be a grind, it can be a hustle, but it's also like super fun. I love co-writing. So yeah, I'm going down to Nashville for like a month in a little while, and gonna meet with at least one publisher. I'm hoping to set up a couple other things, and then I'm writing with a bunch of different songwriters. Most of them are unsigned, but a couple of them are signed. So just about getting your foot in the door, I guess. And then a lot of times too, like when a publisher signs a new writer, they'll ask them like, who are your friends? Like, who do you write with? And then all of a sudden, all of those people are like on their radar, right? And depending on like if somebody got signed by like getting a #1 smash hit, they might just like scoop up those writers right away and not even do the whole like 6-month dance thing, right? It just depends. So that's the other way, is similar to if you're independent, you have a hit song, like every record label is going to be knocking on your door. If you are a writer or a co-writer on somebody else's hit song, like if you get lucky and you somehow pitch it to an A-list artist and it gets in the door and they hear it and they like it, they cut it, it's a hit. That does happen. It's pretty rare, but it does happen. So if something like that happened, then yeah, of course, every publisher is going to want to sign you because they like money. The other way that it's a bit more common to happen is if you start writing with an artist who has some traction but hasn't blown up, and you're writing songs with them, and then one of those artists blows up, well, like there you go, there's your hit song. So that's the other way that it happens. So you either you need to get in through connections with other writers, or through writing a hit song, which is more difficult to do without a publisher because you don't have like direct access to all of these artists' email inboxes who will like, they have relationships with these people and they're actually going to open it and listen to it. But it can be done, and it's done all the time, in fact. So yeah. So that's publishing. Cool. And then we've got production. And so this could be like, sometimes it can include songwriting, but it's also just building tracks, engineering. I feel like everybody kind of knows what production is. I don't need to explain that, but I can give some insight on maybe some like freelance rates. A lot of people, when they're just starting out, they'll work for free, and I think that's good for building a portfolio. Some people will recommend working for free because like those can turn into paying clients. In my experience, it probably won't. So if you're doing something for free, just make sure that the portfolio gains alone are worth it. I like don't do something for free with the expectation that like, oh, if you do a good job, that artist will like pay you to do it next time, because they probably won't, realistically. Like they're either gonna get funding. Yeah, exactly. This comment is great from Cameron. In my experience, if you do something for free, then they expect you to continue to do it for free, which is true. And I mean, in a way, like, you're setting a precedent, right? And that's not to say don't do it. I think there's a time and place to do things for free, but it's for it needs to be worth it for the development alone, rather than as a means to, like, you can, don't get me wrong, you can leverage that to get paid work, like, especially if that's a really talented um, if it's a really talented artist and you do something for free for them and it sounds great, and you're you know learning more skills, like, you can leverage that um, to get other paid work by putting it on social media and shopping it around and kind of getting yourself out there in that way. And there's a chance that uh, that they'll they'll be willing to pay you for it in the future, but I just wouldn't count on it, because either they're like, they don't have the money, and if they get money, then they're going to want somebody more experienced, or yeah, I think Cameron put it perfectly. It's just you kind of setting an expectation. So just, I'm not saying don't do it, just be aware of it. But yeah, in terms of like rates as a freelance engineer, if you're like relatively unexperienced, but you don't want to work for free, like, maybe $25 an hour is kind of like a low starting point. Up to Goes up to like 100 an hour for somebody who's skilled but not renowned, like, you don't have clout. As soon as you have, you know, big hits and everybody's wanting to, or not even necessarily hits, but like, if you become renowned in even like a local scene, then maybe you could charge more than $100 an hour. But I think that would probably be the cap for somebody who's like very good at what they do, but doesn't have like doesn't have a resume that, essentially, it's a supply and demand thing, right? Because it's not even necessarily that people want the sort of social proof, which is definitely part of it. It's like, yeah, if you worked on a John Mayer record, it's like, oh, well, he must be good, right? Or she must be good. Which, especially with John Mayer, the production is unreal, so that probably is true. But it's also just, your work is going to be exposed to so many more people, that the pool of potential clients coming into your ecosystem is just way bigger. And then it's supply and demand. Like, if your schedule is completely packed and you're charging $60 an hour, like, you could put that up to 80, and you'll probably still be pretty full, or you could put it up to 100 if you want to be working a little bit less. And oh yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that working for an exchange of skills and services could also be an option in cases where they are also starting out and don't have a lot of funds to be able to pay you much. Yeah, or even, like, honestly, like, sometimes like, I still do that, and I had a session recently where somebody somebody came up to me and they're like, hey, like, can you do trumpet on this song? It'll take like an hour. Like, let me know what your rate is for that. And I was like, yeah, I mean, like, I could charge you a couple $100. Like, if you want to just pay me for the hour, it'll be 250, or you could help me finish this mix. You know, because I knew that they were a great engineer, and I you know, I can mix my own stuff, but I prefer not to, because I'm kind of too close to it. So actually, that song that I showed you guys earlier was a song that I sort of bartered the last little bit of the mix and master for a trumpet session. So fun story. And it's like, you know, I could have just taken the money and then like paid him or paid somebody else, but it just made sense. So that's still something that I do occasionally. And you know, we're both fairly established, so it's not even necessarily just when you're starting out. The next thing on the list here is sync. I've got another spreadsheet for y'all. So this one is, I went on the Music Supervisors of Canada Guild. They have a website. And do you guys all know what a music supervisor is? Maybe somebody can unmute and tell us if you know.
I can try if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
If I'm correct, I believe a music supervisor is the person that is in charge of like looking over the music submissions that are sent to them and deciding which music will go into a movie or like TV show.
Yeah, and often it's it can be submissions, or they're like actively looking for stuff as well, and they'll get briefs sometimes from. It could also be ads, but it's typically, if you're talking about sync, it's you're syncing it to some sort of video. So as Alyssa said, often that'll be TV or movies, but it could be like, it could be like a trailer as well. Like sometimes the music for a trailer will be different than the actual movie. Could be an ad, could be I mean, I guess those are kind of the main things, but yeah, that's correct. So the spreadsheet that I just popped down there in the chat is every like major music supervisor in Canada. There's not that many of them. There's 28 to be exact. I'm sure there are more music supervisors in Canada, but these are the ones that are accredited on the Music Supervisors Guild. So they're going to have like the biggest projects. They're it's like sort of like a union. They're like the most legit. And in fact, there was one, Cody Partridge. He, last time I was, like when I was in the co-op in 2022 or 23, Cody came in and did a chat. So I've met him before. He's a really nice guy. But Cody's coming next week. Sweet. All right, I'll definitely check that out. So you already have his email. But yeah, there's a few. So like on the website, it lists all of their names, and then I did some digging, and I was able to find most of their emails, and there's a few that I couldn't. But typically, from what I understand, especially in Canada, it's more common for them to be like to actually listen to unsolicited submissions. Yeah, so that's a great question. How would you approach reaching out to them? Honestly, I would ask Cody that, because I could answer that, and it would basically just be my recollection of what he told me when I asked him that exact question like 2 years ago, which I'll give a brief version, but yeah, I'll definitely be asking him that again in the workshop. But yeah, what he said in a nutshell was to have all of your music like organized really well in a way that's not going to expire or be difficult to find. So like for example, like WeTransfer, it expires after, depending on what plan you have, like 3 days or like up to a year if you pay for it. Also, I don't know if you guys have read the updated terms and services of WeTransfer, but it's like basically they're using everything that that is transferred through their service to train AI. So, and you're like signing away the like rights for usage in that purpose. So it's like seems pretty sketchy. I wouldn't use WeTransfer at all anymore, but certainly not for approaching music supervisors for sync purposes. And yeah, my recommendation would be either Google Drive, or there's a service called Disco that a lot of music supervisors use to kind of catalog their potential music that they're gonna place, that they're gonna sync, and it's like that's a really good way of organizing your music. It is a paid service. It's like $20 a month, so it's like Google Drive is perfectly acceptable, and you know, it's either free or you know, if you are paying it, at least you can use it to store all sorts of stuff, right? But I guess the advantage of Disco is that like that's the platform that the supervisors are using themselves, so it just makes it a little bit easier for them, and some of them like that. It might increase your odds a little bit, but it might be just an unnecessary expense. I can't really say. I personally have it. I might be a sucker, but yeah, it's kind of cool because you can. I guess you could do this with folders in Google Drive as well, but you can upload the stems of your music. So a lot of times for sync, they will want access to the stems in case they want to sync it like without the vocals or something, or they just want the bass. Like sometimes stuff like that happens, where it's, you know, they want to be able to maybe tweak the mix, especially if it was like for an ad and they wanted to like make space for like sound effects by compressing the guitar at a certain point. You know, they'll do stuff like that. So I'm probably too deep in the weeds here. I think I got off track of answering the question of like how to actually approach them, which is just to send a short professional email with a link to your music, have everything laid out properly, and to be persistent but not like overly. You know, you don't want to be emailing them every day, but yeah, you know, we can ask Cody about that if he's coming back. That's awesome. He's I remember him like really having a lot of good insights, so I'm looking forward to that. On a similar kind of wavelength, we've got stock music. It's kind of, it's still sync often because people will be using it for YouTube videos, or sometimes maybe even movies or ads or things of that nature, but they tend to be a little bit more like for those who can upload your music into these libraries, and then people will be able to like pick music from the libraries, and they're on like a subscription basis, and then it's like a non-exclusive license typically. So many different people can use that that song for sync. Whereas if so, like a blockbuster movie is not going to use a stock music library usually. That would be very unusual. They're going to want to get a specifically curated song from their music supervisor, and they're probably going to want an exclusive license to use the song. That doesn't mean you can't like release the song and like perform it and stuff, of course, but in terms of like it can't be in another movie essentially for however many years or maybe in perpetuity. So if it's an exclusive license, the payment for that is going to be much higher. If it's a non-exclusive deal, like maybe you can get a bunch of them and it's kind of just like background music, it's a less important role. But so you're not going to be making like thousands and thousands of dollars, at least not off of one single usage. But you know, there are some people who just do a ton of those stock music things and put them in libraries, and they just crank them out, and they do a ton of volume that way. And there are definitely people making good money off of that. To me, that seems like the first domino in the AI domino hellhole, is like just like stock music that maybe is pretty generic and doesn't really matter that much in terms of its role in the placement. Yeah, like to me, the things that AI is going to be able to do well are like the super generic things, because it's kind of just regurgitating whatever information it's fed off of. So it's going to be really good at writing stuff that just sounds, you know, familiar, which is, I think, a lot of what's going on there in the stock music world. The cool thing about sync, though, is that it's not really genre specific. Like you can kind of get anything synced, because, you know, there are movies that have cinematic scores. There are movies that have death metal. You know, if you need a scene at a bar where there was a band playing or something or whatever. So that's kind of cool. I was like maybe a little bit less restrictive than if you're going for radio or something like that. Like sometimes some pretty weird stuff can get synced too. Another thing that some people do is sample packs. So they'll, you know, make loops and one shots and stuff like that. I know people who upload stuff to Splice. I don't know anybody who makes like a lot of money off of that, but I know some people who seem to think it's worthwhile because they keep doing it. And I've never really asked like how much, but you know, if you were like one of the top sample makers on a platform like that, then maybe it's decent money. I wouldn't expect to make a fortune off of it, but the probably the most money that you could make off of selling sample packs is if you had a large social media following and you were selling it directly on your website. Would be my guess. But and sorry, going back to sync in terms of like how much money you could expect from a sync. I've heard of anything from like a few $100 for like a student film or something, up to, well, I mean, let's assume that you're not Beyonce, because if you're like a famous artist already, then like you could potentially be getting millions of dollars for a sync. But let's just assume that um, the general public has no idea who you are, and this supervisor just really likes your song, which is the other cool thing about sync is like you don't need a following. Like they typically don't care about that unless, like I said, they want a song that's already a hit for some reason. I've heard of like up to 150,000 for like the sync fee. That would be for like a major blockbuster film, or maybe even for an ad. So the upfront fees for ads tend to be more because the royalty structure is different and you don't make as much on the back end. But and it depends on the usage as well. So if you're getting like $150,000, for example, for a sync, it's probably, let's assume that it's a movie. It would have to be like a really big movie, high budget, and it would also have to be prominently featured. So there are different sort of categories, and there are names for each of the categories, and there's like specific parameters that maybe Cody will talk about it. I can't recall like all of the details, but basically there's like if your song is played for like 6 seconds in the background of a restaurant scene, it's going to be in a different usage category than if it's like I'm a believer in Shrek, where it's like basically like a music video, you know, they play the whole song. So yeah, like probably for, if I were to guess, this is speculative, but the people on those contact lists, they're probably placing a lot of stuff in Netflix shows and like stuff that's like pretty, like it's legit, but not like crazy high budget. So I like, don't quote me on this, but if I were to guess, probably the range of most of their placements would be somewhere between like $5,000 and $25,000 up front, and then you would also get royalties each time that is that's played as well. So if it's something that's like has a lot of longevity, then you know your royalties could be as much or more than the initial placement over time. If it's something that just airs for a little bit, then you know less so, and that's part of the reason why ads pay more on average, because you're not going to run an ad for years and years, so the expectation is that the back end royalties are going to be significantly less. Okay. Okay, and then we've got jingles. We've got that's kind of a similar world. To be honest, this is something that I've never. I don't know anybody who writes jingles, and I've never like actively pursued it myself. But it's I know that it's like a similar. It's basically like you're writing for sync, but specifically for ads. So some of that could be done the same way as through music supervisors, but the way that this could be different is you might be commissioned to write a jingle. Like if you work for a jingle house, like if Bell is looking for something for their new commercial or something, if they want something just to like be fun while the puppy dances with the phone or whatever Belle does, I don't know, they might go through a music supervisor for that. But if they want something that's going to be like their slogan, like Sleep Country Canada or something where it's like specifically for that, then they're gonna commission a writer to do that specifically. And I have no idea how to get that gig, so don't ask me. Maybe I should look into it. But yeah, it's not really a world that I've even come up against in person, which is, I think, maybe the only one on this list. Like, I haven't done all of these personally. I've done a lot of them, but I think that's the only one where I don't even know anybody who's written a jingle. But they're out there. There are jingles being written. If you guys know, let me know. Yeah, I guess that brings us to scoring. So there's scoring for, a number of things. The main two that I can think of are video games and film scoring. And yeah, that's like, it can be, I think that could be like a pretty interesting gig. I've done like sound design gigs, which are a little bit different, but I'd be like working with the film score on a film to sort of like help with the mixing and the sound effects to accompany the actual music. So from like working with a couple of film scores that I've come across, like my initial impression, if you go and you watch a movie, something that stands out to me is you can get away with a lot more with the visual to justify it, right? Like somebody's not gonna, the average person isn't going to listen to like some avant-garde classical score, but if you're into writing that kind of music and the movie is good and it justifies it, like people will watch that movie and they will enjoy the score because it enhances the emotional kind of impact. So that's a way, like especially if you're into like modern orchestral music, the average person isn't going to go to the symphony, at least not very often, but they'll listen to that music while they're watching a movie. So that's one side of it. The other side of it, from people who've been doing it for a while, is that often the director will be very attached to, like they know what they want, and so you can get away with doing some like kind of cool like left of center shit, but you're ultimately serving the director's version, so you don't really have a lot of creative control, and a lot of the time the director will, when they're editing the movie, they'll have like reference music, and it could be anything like you can use, somebody could use one of your songs for reference music for editing a film, and they wouldn't have to pay you for it because they're not releasing it. They're just putting it in Premiere or DaVinci or whatever, and they're using it to listen to while they're editing a movie. So if it's not actually making it to the theater, then they can kind of use whatever music they want. So a lot of times, the director will get attached to the music that they've been living with on this movie for months potentially, right? But the studio can't afford that Beyonce song, so they want something that sounds basically like that Beyonce song. You know what I mean? So in that case, they might put out what's called a brief to a publisher. So publishers also deal in sync. So they put out a brief to publishers and also their music supervisor, likely, of like what they're looking for specifically. And you can sometimes find these briefs online where it's basically like an open call where it's like, yes, submit for this by this date. We're looking for something that sounds like X, Y, and Z, right, for this movie. Some briefs are available publicly, other ones are not. They will just send them to their like trusted contacts to keep it a little bit more targeted in terms of who's submitting for it. But yeah, and there's a similar thing. I can actually show you one of these. There's a similar thing in the pitch world for songwriting where different record labels will put out what's called a tip sheet. And a tip sheet is basically a everybody who's recording a record, they'll usually put out a tip sheet every like, it's not on any schedule, but like roughly every 3 to 6 months, there'll be a new pitch sheet from all the major labels. And it tells you who's in the studio, who's looking for songs, what kind of songs they're looking for, and yeah, sometimes contact information, usually not. Usually you have to find that yourself. But if you're trying to pitch stuff to different artists, this is a good thing to have. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull this up so that I can share it with you guys. Okay, there we go. So yeah, this is a current pitch sheet. So these are all of the artists who are potentially looking for songs right now. So it'll tell you a little bit of information about. So like Christina Aguilera, she just signed. So she just changed record labels. I don't know what to do with that information, but maybe if you read between the lines, there's some sort of significance to that. Sometimes the notes are helpful, sometimes less. But yeah, you can kind of see just like Celine Dion is looking for iconic anthemic songs. So it gives you a little bit of insight, at least, A, like who's cutting, and B, what they might be looking for. Like sometimes it'll say no slow songs because they already know that they have, like they've started the album in this scenario, hypothetically, and they've already got 2 slow songs on it or 3 slow songs on it, and they don't want any more. You could send them the best song ever, and if it's like, no, they've already recorded those 3. They're looking for, they've recorded 6 songs. They've got 3 slow ones, 2 mediums, 1 up tempo. They need 2 more up tempo, or whatever it might be. Like that's just a random example, but sometimes you'll get some information that that could be interesting. And this is interesting, like JP Sachs looking for co-writes. pretty cool. I would like to write with JP Sachs, but that's probably more like, you know, if you're a publisher looking at that, maybe you'll hit up JP Sachs' management if you have like a hit songwriter who's looking to write. Like it's probably not like an open call to like he's looking to write with randoms. But anyways, that can be definitely useful. So sorry, I'm just looking through the chat here. Are you able to resend the link sent earlier for the festival list? And I'm not sure which others he sent. Okay, great. Thanks for taking care of that. All right, so we got like just a few minutes left here. I think I think we've gone through everything on the list, to be honest, which is great. Do we have any questions? You just unmute if you do.
Yeah, just a quick one. I know that you were saying when you gave that festival directory that you had another one that included things that are like Ontario as well.
I'll have to have a look for that. I'm not sure. I thought that was the one that I sent, and it was the wrong spreadsheet. So I'll
Yeah,
find
no
it and
worries.
I'll put it on Slack or something. Yeah. Oh, the list that I have up now is called a tip sheet.
If you don't mind me asking, how did you get access to this tip sheet?
Oh yeah, it's through Songtown. So Songtown, I mentioned it earlier as well. It's they do like all sorts of events and like some networking stuff, and then like a lot of like online educational things. And yeah, I got it through their website, and they got it from, I guess, various labels. Like there's kind of just there are different tip sheets, but there are kind of the main ones that sort of just get sent around in email chains, and sometimes you can find them online. Yeah, they're updated every few months or so. Can I send a link? Yes, I can. I don't know if it'll be. Yeah, hopefully it works. Yeah, can somebody let me know if that works? If it doesn't, I could download it and put it in Google Drive and send it. It does.
It worked.
Okay. Yeah, because I have like an account on their website. I wasn't sure if it would like make you log in to do it. Cool. All right. Anything else? Is that it? Maybe I'll double check the list, see if we forgot anything. Oh, yeah, there's lessons. There's lessons. So, yeah, you can do it like two ways with lessons. One of them is to work for a school. That's often easier to get started. You don't have to find your own students. They'll kind of take care of the scheduling, the billing, all that kind of stuff. Of course, the drawback is that it pays less. In my experience, those gigs can pay anywhere from like $25 to like $60 an hour if you're working for a school. On the high range of that is private schools. Typically, if you're getting 60, just because they have a lot of money, I guess. If you're kind of in the middle range, say you're at like 40, that's either just a really good busy school and you're going there and your schedule's packed and you're working there at the facility itself, at the school itself, I would say 40 is like a bit above average for something like that. But I've taught at schools where their like base rate in school is like 45. Usually it'll be more like 35 to like 35, 38 if you're teaching in the school. And if you're teaching in the students' homes, they'll compensate you for your travel time between the homes as well. So then it's usually like 50 an hour or so, between 40 and 50 an hour. If you're teaching like privately, you can charge whatever people are willing to pay, I guess, which I've found is like 70 or 80 an hour. Like if a new student approaches me, I'll usually quote 80 an hour. Now I have one student who's been with me forever that I still charge 70 because I don't know. He's been grandfathered in. Yeah, and I know people who charge more too, like up to 100 an hour. I don't like actively look for students really. I just have like a couple left over from when I used to do more teaching, and and the odd time I'll like sub into a music school if somebody asks me to do it and I'm free. But it can be good. It's one of the few gigs that like having a degree is helpful in terms of acquiring it. I mean, there are lots of gigs where the things that you learn while doing a music degree are helpful, but that's one of the ones where they will actually care about the paper, the credential, or even if you don't have a degree, if you're like doing a degree, that's often enough. So with that said, the rates that I was saying where, if you're teaching out of school, you can expect somewhere between 35 and 60. If you don't have a degree, that might be a little lower. It might be more like, well, you're probably not going to get the $60 one. You might try. But yeah, like you might still be able to get a teaching gig, but some of them will be like they just require you to have a degree, and the ones that don't, if they're still willing to hire you, they might just pay you slightly less unless you have equivalent experience or like just a lot of like a really extensive teaching resume. Then after a while you'd probably get up to the same wage. But I don't know how much that would impact the pay, but if I were to guess, maybe like $10 an hour on average. So instead of like the 35 to 60 range, you'd probably be more in like the 25 to 40 range. But I don't know for sure. Does anybody here do teaching? I don't know. Especially if you don't have a degree, maybe you could weigh in on that. It's something to look into because if you're at a good school, it can be a fun job, and like if you're teaching things, sometimes it can help solidify it for yourself too. So you end up learning just as much as you teach. But yeah, anyways, I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much for coming out, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly helpful. Thank you so much. This meeting is recorded for anyone that wants to get access to any of the information that was said. Thank you guys for coming. Have a good night. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks.